The smart and meticulous final address of the Labour Party is here, and it's quite a long read. Let's start with the response to the election. Labour Party said in their final address that after conducting data analysis for the 18,088 polling unit blood results on the IREV, that they represent 2.5,065,269 accredited voters. Probing further in these polling units, 9,165,191 voters collected their PVCs in these polling units. So the number of accredited voters is higher than the margin between Tinubu and Peter Obi. While it's acceptable that all the accredited voters in the more than 18,000 polling units that their results are blurred didn't vote for one candidate, but without determining their numbers, it renders the announced results invalid. Mind you, these are not the only votes unaccounted for by INEC. According to the data analysis by Labour Party's witness, which was unchallenged by the respondents, 39,546 polling units are inaccessible on the IREV. And in these polling units, a total number of 23,119,298 registered voters collected their PVCs, and 5,532,553 voters were accredited on election day to vote in these polling units. So when you add this figure to the other 2.5 million, the unaccounted votes are more than 8 million votes, which is too high when you look at the margin between Tinubu and Peter Obi based on the INEC allocated figures. So what the LP legal team are trying to say here is that there was massive suppression of votes by INEC, and they shouldn't have called the election without accounting for all the votes, especially when the unaccounted votes are higher than the margin between candidates. Recently, INEC had to declare some governorship elections inconclusive because unresolved and unaccounted votes were higher than the margin of lead. Why didn't they do that during the presidential election? And INEC, hoping that there's insufficient evidence to prove this, having not provided the hard copies that represent the blurred and inaccessible results, the Labour Party is asking the question, if their witness claimed that they collated the results with hard copies and the blurred copies didn't affect the outcome, why didn't they tender the hard copies in court to prove it? If the hard copies are truly in their possession. Also, why didn't they certify the hard copies and deliver them to the Labour Party? Instead, they certified blurred IREV copies that are unreadable. Some are not even results, but images from other things. So in the absence of hard copies from INEC, Labour Party are telling the court to invoke presumption of Section 167 subsection D of the Evidence Act in their favor. They also cited a Supreme Court judgment between Danladi and Dangiri 2015, where the Supreme Court held that if an admitted document is incomplete, the party to be damnified is the one who ought to have produced the proper or correct and complete document, if he failed to produce the said document in its correct form. So based on this, they are asking the court to refer to the 18,088 blurred copies as the results for the election. They also said that the alleged technological glitch on the day of election isn't a valid justification for the outright violation of the Electoral Act, INEC regulation and guidelines, and the manual for election officials. Like you already know, we've covered these extensively. All these laws make the upload of forms EC8As to IREV mandatory from the polling units immediately after vote counting. INEC in their final address claimed that the Federal High Court, while delivering judgment on the case between them and the Labour Party, held that they can conduct election and do collation anyhow they wish. This judgment, the Labour Party legal team said, is inferior to that of the Supreme Court on Oyetola versus INEC. Also, INEC in their final address argued that their guidelines and regulations are not binding, that they are ordinary documents. Let's see how the Labour Party countered. They quoted a judicial precedent by the Supreme Court, Faleke versus INEC. In that judgment, Honorable Justice Ogumbiyi said, the Manual for Election Official 2015, which makes a substantial part of the one INEC is using now, the 2023 version, he said that they are not mere instructions or directions, rather they are subsidiary legislations which have the force of law. They have their origin from the Constitution and the Electoral Act. This is true. That's why you see citations of the Electoral Act in the manual. Let's see what the INEC guideline says in paragraph 2. Election transmission and upload of election results and publishing to the INEC result viewing portal. One of the problems noticed in the electoral process is the irregularities that take place between the polling units after the announcement of results and the point of result collation. Sometimes results are hijacked, exchanged, or even destroyed at the polling unit. or on the way to the collation centers, it becomes necessary to apply technology to transmit the data from the polling units such that the results are collated up to the point of result declaration. The real-time publishing of polling unit level results on IREV portal and transmission of results using the BVAS demonstrates INEC's commitment to transparency in results management. This commitment is backed by sections 42 subsection 2, 60 subsection 1, 2, and 5, 64 subsection 4A and 4B, and 64 subsection 5 of the Electoral Act 2022, which confers INEC with the power to transmit election results electronically. The system minimizes human errors and delays in results collation and improves the accuracy, transparency, and credibility of the results collation process. So how can INEC overlook all these and say that uploading of results is not mandatory and that the non-upload didn't affect the results? The Labour Party legal team cited Section 60 of the Electoral Act 2022. This section not only makes it mandatory to upload results, it also provides punishment for presiding officers who fail to follow the law. They can be imprisoned or fined if they are convicted. Also, Labour Party said that according to their cybersecurity expert witness that INEC did not properly test their IT infrastructure deployed for the conduct of the election. The expert found many vulnerabilities and INEC failed to comply with the standard and guidelines for government websites. And since this evidence was not countered, none of the respondents tendered any other test report to the contrary. Labour Party are asking the court to invoke presumption based on Section 167 subsection D of the Evidence Act. And going by all these evidence submitted by the petitioners that they have established the non-compliance by INEC, and non-compliance was not only substantial but grievously affected the outcome of the presidential election. They also highlighted the data analysis by the mathematician that proves that Labour Party won Rivers and Benue states. The results he computed were gotten from Forms EC8As uploaded on IREV and the certified true copies of Forms EC8As given to Labour Party by INEC. So going by this unchallenged report alone, Labour Party will add 2 states to the number of states they won, while the APC will lose 2 states. Based on all these, Labour Party are asking the court to nullify the presidential election in the interest of justice and declare the purported return of Tinubu invalid. Going by the arguments, you can see the strategy deployed by the Labour Party legal team. These lawyers know their onions, and this shows that they did not tender the total computed figures that they scored in the election. This is intentional. Although when the star witness was questioned about it, he said that the prof mentioned it in his statement. They all intentionally avoided this because of one reason. You cannot on one hand be telling the court to nullify the election because it was conducted in gross violation of the Electoral Act, and on the other hand be telling the court to declare you winner. You can't seriously tell the court that you won an election that was seriously flawed. Yes, but they still pleaded it in their petition. But that will happen if the court determines that the gross violation didn't affect the results, which will ultimately lead to the recollation of the results. Yes, Labour Party avoided not getting trapped in claiming that they won a flawed election, but they still gave the court the evidence that proves they won. So it's left for the court to decide, but let's not go deep into the analysis. It's better done in another video. Before we see their response on the 25% requirement in Abuja, let's see how they countered INEC on their thinking that they are not bound by statements they made before the election. If you